Let me see your hands. Berg, get on the ground. Get on the ground. Get on the ground right here. Get on the ground. You, burgundy shirt, get on the ground. Over here. On the ground.
On July 26, 2021, officers from the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety responded to a call reporting a man allegedly banging on a townhouse door with a firearm in his waistband. Among the officers dispatched was David Lance Dukes. Upon arriving, Officer Dukes encountered 58-year-old Clarence Gailyard, a man with significant physical impairments, along with his cousin, Mario Julian, standing outside in the parking lot. According to the call, Gailyard was suspected of carrying a weapon, but what unfolds raises immediate legal questions about the proportionality of police actions.
On the ground! Get on the ground! Do you not listen? Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
Officer Dukes immediately drew his firearm and ordered both men to the ground, repeatedly insisting on compliance. In moments like this, the law distinguishes between consensual encounters, investigative detentions, and arrests. Here, the officer's deployment of his weapon, coupled with forceful verbal commands, would likely qualify the encounter as a detention under the Fourth Amendment, which must be supported by reasonable suspicion. Legally, even if the initial call suggested the presence of a gun, officers are bound by the standard that any use of force must be objectively reasonable in light of the circumstances.
Get on the ground! There's a gun behind me. There's a gun, I believe, behind me.
I ain't got no gun, nothing.
Put your hands behind your back.
Gailyard attempted to comply with the officer's commands by lowering himself onto his hands and knees, but due to pre-existing physical limitations, he could not immediately lie flat on the ground. At this point, Officer Dukes forcibly used his foot to push Gailyard fully to the pavement, causing his head to strike the concrete violently. From a legal perspective, this action implicates several doctrines. Fourth Amendment. Courts apply the objective reasonableness standard from Graham v. Connor, 1989, asking whether the officer's actions were reasonable from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, considering the severity of the alleged offense, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat, whether the suspect was resisting or attempting to flee. Here, Gailyard's physical compliance, though slow, combined with his nonviolent behavior, raises serious questions about whether the force used was excessive. Courts routinely consider a suspect's physical limitations when evaluating the reasonableness of force. Demanding instantaneous compliance from a person who cannot move quickly due to medical conditions or prior injuries may be seen as unreasonable. For law enforcement officers, an act of stomping on a suspect's head while the individual is already on the ground and attempting compliance could support criminal charges such as assault or battery, depending on state law. In fact, this is consistent with the charges that were later filed in this case.
No gun. You're not listening, dude.
Even at this early stage of the encounter, a court might examine whether the 911 call alone provided sufficient justification for the level of force used, whether the officer's immediate drawing of a firearm was proportionate to the threat, whether alternative methods of compliance, such as verbal de-escalation, could have been employed. These are not abstract legal concepts. They are the very questions that judges consider when determining whether force crosses the line from lawful to excessive.
Bro, you got a gun on you, man?
No, I ain't got no gun.
Right,
I
I'm
don't
just
want no gun.
When courts evaluate a police officer's use of force, the guiding standard comes from the 1989 Supreme Court decision Graham v. Connor. That case established that the Fourth Amendment requires any use of force to be objectively reasonable, looking at the situation from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene without the benefit of hindsight. Graham identified three critical factors for courts to consider: the severity of the suspected crime, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat to the safety of officers or others, whether the suspect was actively resisting arrest or attempting to flee. These factors are designed to measure the proportionality of the officer's response, ensuring that force is not excessive relative to the circumstances.
He had something.
I ain't own no gun.
The door's unlocked in the car, so.
No, he was right here. What?
I don't own no gun.
All right, that's what he had.
After forcing Clarence Gailyard to the ground, the officers begin attempting to determine whether a firearm is actually present. The original 911 call suggested that Gailyard had a gun in his waistband, and officers initially treated the encounter as if they were confronting an armed individual. At this point in the interaction, the officers can be heard questioning both Gailyard and his cousin about the alleged weapon, while continuing to keep them on the ground. One officer scans the area near a truck, where the caller reportedly believed a gun had been seen. Moments later, an object is located. It quickly becomes apparent that the item is not a firearm, but rather the object that had been mistaken for one, a walking stick wrapped with reflective tape. This discovery significantly changes the legal posture of the encounter.
Yep.
Listen.
Yep, they slammed my head
Listen.
down on the cement. Yep.
Go back inside. Go back in the house. Go back in the house. Ain't nobody talking to you.
I got head drummer.
Go back in the house.
Yep. Y'all bust.
During this time, other individuals in the area attempt to speak with the officers or ask questions about what just happened. One officer responds by instructing them to return inside the residence. Police officers generally have the authority to control a scene for safety reasons, particularly during an ongoing investigation. Directing bystanders to step back or move away from an active scene is typically considered lawful, so long as the order is reasonably related to maintaining safety or preventing interference with police duties. However, courts have also emphasized that officers cannot use such commands simply to prevent witnesses from observing or criticizing police conduct, as the public retains broad rights to observe and record police activity in public spaces. Even as officers call for medical assistance, the central legal issue remains unchanged. The key question is whether the force used earlier, specifically driving Gailyard's head into the pavement while he was attempting to comply, was constitutionally reasonable under the circumstances. The discovery that Gailyard was never armed at all further complicates the officer's justification and strengthens the argument that the force used was disproportionate to the threat actually presented. As the situation settles and medical assistance is requested, Clarence Gailyard can be heard repeatedly telling the officers that his head was slammed into the concrete. He also emphasizes that he is disabled, suggesting that his slow movement was the result of physical limitations rather than resistance. At the same time, Officer Dukes begins explaining his version of events to another officer at the scene. According to Dukes, when he first arrived, he believed that Gailyard was holding a firearm and claims he repeatedly ordered him to drop the weapon. Dukes further states that Gailyard allegedly kept his hands in his pockets and did not comply with instructions to show his hands.
Bust my head down. Yeah, I've been in an accident. Yep, y'all bust my head down. You threw me down.
I sure did.
and-
You wasn't listening.
Yeah. No, it ain't. You ain't to throw me down like that.
In evaluating use of force incidents, courts recognize that officers must often make decisions quickly and under stress. Because of this, the law does not require officers to be perfect in their assessment of danger. However, the standard established in Graham v. Connor requires that the officer's perception of a threat must still be objectively reasonable when compared to the actual facts of the situation. This distinction is critical. An officer's belief that a suspect might be armed can justify heightened caution. But if the surrounding circumstances would lead a reasonable officer to conclude that no immediate threat existed, then aggressive force may still violate constitutional protections.
I'm disability.
Okay.
I got head problem. Yep, you threw me down. Yep, you threw me down. You threw me down. Yep, you bust my head down on the cement.
In modern policing cases, body camera footage often becomes the most influential evidence in determining what actually happened. When an officer's recollection of events conflicts with what appears on video, courts frequently rely heavily on the footage to determine whether the officer's explanation is credible. This does not automatically mean the officer is lying. Stressful situations can affect memory and perception. However, when the objective record contradicts the officer's stated justification, the legal consequences can be severe. Officer Dukes' explanation attempts to frame the encounter as a situation involving a potentially armed suspect who was not complying with commands. But if a court reviewing the footage concludes that Gailyard was already complying and posed no immediate threat, then the officer's use of force may be seen not merely as excessive, but as unlawful under constitutional standards. This distinction is crucial because the legality of the officer's actions ultimately turns on what a reasonable officer would have perceived in that exact moment. As Officer Dukes continues explaining the incident to other officers, the body camera footage begins to raise serious questions about the accuracy of his description. Dukes claims that when he first encountered Clarence Gailyard, he repeatedly ordered him to drop a gun and show his hands. According to Dukes, Gailyard ignored those commands and kept his hands in his pockets, prompting the officer to escalate the situation. However, the video evidence tells a noticeably different story. The footage shows that Gailyard's hands were visible for most of the encounter, and that the officer's commands were focused almost entirely on ordering him to get on the ground, rather than telling him to drop a weapon. Additional documentation from officers who were present at the scene further complicates the narrative provided by Officer Dukes. An incident report written by Corporal Brandy Smith indicates that while Gailyard may initially have appeared to have his hands in his pockets as he walked from the passenger side of the vehicle, he removed them once he reached the front of the car. Smith's report confirms that Dukes was issuing loud verbal commands for Gailyard to get on the ground, but it does not mention any orders to drop a gun or display his hands. This detail matters because if a suspect's hands are already visible, commands to show them would typically be unnecessary. The absence of such commands therefore tends to support the interpretation that officers could already see Gailyard's hands. Another critical issue involves the exact method used to bring Gailyard to the ground. When Officer Dukes described the incident to his superiors, he did not clearly explain how the takedown occurred. Instead, the details of the force were documented primarily through the reports written by other officers at the scene. Corporal Smith's report suggests that Dukes placed his foot on the middle of Gailyard's back and pushed him down after he did not fully lie on the ground. But a separate report, written by Sergeant Akel Polidor, describes the event in far more severe terms. According to that report, Dukes jumped up and stomped on the back of Gailyard's neck with his foot. Whether the officer's foot landed on the neck or slightly lower on the upper back is difficult to determine with complete certainty from the body camera footage. But what is clear is that the accounts provided by multiple officers differ significantly from one another, and they also differ from the explanation given by Officer Dukes.
Slam my head down.
Dude, I didn't know what his intention was.
You need to have a look at the camera.
The officer did wrong. Slam my head down. Bust my forehead.
In legal proceedings involving police use of force, consistency between reports, testimony, and video evidence becomes extremely important. When an officer's description of an incident fails to match the objective evidence, or conflicts with reports from other officers, it can undermine the credibility of the officer's justification for using force. This does not automatically resolve the legal question, but it often plays a major role in how courts and investigators evaluate the officer's conduct. Meanwhile, as officers attempt to determine who initially called police, Gailyard continues repeating that his head was slammed into the concrete and that he has suffered a head injury. The officers acknowledge that his head struck the pavement, and the conversation shifts toward identifying the complainant who reported the alleged gun. But regardless of who made the call, the central legal issue remains the same. The key question is whether the force used to bring Gailyard to the ground was justified under the circumstances, particularly given the growing evidence that he was unarmed and attempting to comply with commands. As officers continue speaking with one another at the scene, it becomes increasingly clear that no one intends to file a complaint against Clarence Gailyard, and that the object, initially mistaken for a firearm, is simply a dog walking stick. With that realization, the officers begin discussing what to do next. One officer suggests that Gailyard should be taken out of handcuffs, while another indicates that emergency medical personnel should evaluate him for the head injury he claims occurred during the encounter. Moments later, the handcuffs are removed. At this point, the interaction shifts from an investigative detention to what is essentially a post-incident assessment, with officers attempting to determine how the situation unfolded and whether medical assistance is required. However, Gailyard continues insisting that the officer slammed his head into the cement, making it clear that he believes the force used against him was unjustified. After emergency medical personnel evaluated Clarence Gailyard for the head injury he sustained during the encounter, he and his cousin were ultimately allowed to leave the scene. The situation did not end there. 2 days after the incident, the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety terminated Officer David Lance Dukes for violating the department's internal use-of-force policies. While those policies are not publicly available, the department's decision to take immediate disciplinary action indicates that supervisors concluded the force used during the encounter did not comply with departmental standards. Roughly a month later, the former officer was criminally charged with first-degree assault and battery, a felony under South Carolina law that can carry a sentence of up to 10 years in prison.